find Jonathan, find someone from industry, and we'll make the introduction. Don't be shy. We like going old school. It's still somewhat intimate here in terms of crowd. Get up, shake someone's hand, introduce yourself. That's how networking is. So we don't do name tags on purpose for that. It's casual, informal conversation. I see a lot of new faces, which is great. And enjoy.
Can people
Great. So as Ellie said, this is a casual conversation. The participants around the table, we asked to join us who have either specific expertise in on a particular part of the ecosystem, but there's a lot of expertise around the room. I will be regularly stopping and asking for questions. Please ask them as they come to mind. And we will wander a bit, although there is a little bit of an agenda. So I'm going to start asking everyone to do a very quick introduction, and then we're going to actually do a little bit of a deeper dive into the tech companies here and kind of what their offering is as kind of the launch of the conversation.
So do you want a quick spiel on?
We're going to do that after.
Gotcha.
Just
So Manny Puentes, CEO and founder of Rebel AI.
Bob Walczak, currently advisor and consultant, but prior to this I was the global head of product Xaxis.
Andre DeCastro, the founder and CEO of Blockchain of Things.
Kyle Chick, Group M, Managing Partner, oversee blockchain for WPP.
Ed Zavar, CEO and founder of Verify.
Tom Bullock, CTO of MadHive, one of the co-founders and CTO of Zynga as well.
Ivan Guzanko, CEO and co-founder of SmartYads.
Bruce Severin, CEO of Nayax.
Dave Strauss, Director of Marketing Operations at Hearst.
so blockchain inside of AdTech, inside of MarTech, again, we generically call that MadTech. Inside of MadTech has a lot of different applications. We're definitely in early days. While the blockchain technology itself is primarily known as a cryptocurrency, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency tools. It's a tool that can allow you to do better things. So I'd like to ask each of the tech companies to dive, 2-3 minutes, but to talk about what solutions what problems you're trying to solve.
So at Rebel AI, we're basically looking to protect publishers' identity and bring transparency to the industry. And we're doing that with cryptography and blockchain. So I think at the end of the day, I think we're pretty much familiar with a lot of the problems in the industry that we're all probably trying to solve.
Speak up. Sorry, it's a little nuts.
So basically at Rebel AI, we're working on protecting the publisher's identity and using cryptography as the source of truth for transparency. And essentially, we're solving a lot of the domain spoofing problems that exist in the ad ecosystem today. And we believe with IoT and a lot more devices coming online, that security is going to be a big factor in advertising.
I'm not currently running with the tech company, so I'll let you pass.
Okay, thank you. So Blockchain of Things is a horizontal platform enabling blockchain companies, some of them that you've heard, to integrate into the global Bitcoin blockchain and take advantage of all of its facilities. So if you want to produce an identity product, if you want to do global messaging, if you want to do permissioning, everything from product provenance to anything else, we're a horizontal platform allowing your company to integrate quickly into the global Bitcoin blockchain. You need to know nothing about the blockchain. The platform also abstracts out all of the cryptocurrency, so you never have to deal with cryptocurrency in your company, and you can quickly build applications and solutions to take advantage of this wonderful technology. It's called Containers Enterprise.
A lot of agency people like to think that we're turning into technology companies. We are a service-oriented company. We like to forget that sometimes. We are an agent on behalf of our clients' investments and act accordingly. We are always looking for new technologies that can help us support our service-oriented business. In blockchain, we see some potential in certain areas that we'll probably get into as we go through this roundtable. But We are always looking for technologies that support our core business of service, period.
So Verify was founded to solve a problem within the education and employment verification services. It expanded over the past few years to include a blockchain layer, which is being developed, piloted and developed as we speak. The idea is to take these building blocks of our own experiences and create an identity that's based on that. And that identity can be used anywhere in and on the blockchain and off the blockchain. So the concept of identity is very familiar to everybody here. I'm assuming that probably more than 50% of the people in the room were exposed to the Equifax thing that happened a few weeks ago. And that's part of the thing that we're trying to do. One of the taglines that we use is own your background. And that's the lead behind owning the identity that you worked so hard to establish over your lifetime.
So MadHive, we're think of a distributed ad server. We're actually doing ad decisioning and on the blockchain. And so we feel that, doing a distributed ad server, that you can have true transparency of what's going on, why the decision was made, and who made it. So it's MadHive.
Okay, so SmartAS is a technological provider, first of all. We used to be building programmatic ad stacks. So when blockchain came into the game, a lot of our clients applied to us to see how we can use blockchain in the current ad stacks. So we're heavily investing in the infrastructure, trying to build actually the chains that would be capable of the real-time operations. So the POC we have launched not so long ago, like a year ago in Hong Kong, is a derivative trading platform that would probably be something similar to what Lou's doing. And my main goal is to educate the industry to put down the hype and see where blockchain could be really applied.
NYIAX is a trading platform that trades guaranteed contracts in the forward market built on NASDAQ's financial framework. We're utilizing blockchain to record every single transaction to open up transparency to the publishers, advertisers, and agencies. We looked and saw that there was a need within the market to actually stop putting blame on everybody and make it much more open. So that's where NYIAX came from.
So now I kind of want to go to, we'll start with you, Dave. Sure. Hearst, big publisher, advanced from a technology perspective. What are you hoping blockchain solves? Is there a killer app?
Yeah, I think there's a number of problems in the industry, as we all know, and it all revolves around transparency. So I think most of all, we want to solve fraud, we want to solve spoofing, and it's getting some transparency into the ecosystem, understanding how much money is being taken out in the middle, the dollar that Hearst makes, what did that start at the agency? And I think that's my first use case and first goal for hopefully what we can solve, but I'm sure there's plenty more.
And Bob and Kyle, on the other side of the transaction, what are you hoping this is going to solve for you?
Take it down, Bob.
I think that there's, I think ad tech is trying to figure out how to implement blockchain right now, and a lot of the companies around the table are pointing towards major issues. Transparency is obviously a core one. Verification, but I think also you'll be able to see private networks kind of peer-to-peer within organizations working. So if you look at Group M and the multiple agencies they have inside of that are managing supply, how do they manage their contracts and have to do that efficiently at scale? Kind of creating their own private marketplace and have that transparency. They need to be able to have transparency back to the brands that are spending the money. And also agencies, just as much as publishers, want to know that as much of their spend went to the actual publisher and not the intermediaries. So I think that's an application specifically for ad tech. I think blockchain is much broader than that to me, obviously, and I think there's a lot of applications. From my standpoint, I'm interested in the whole ecosystem of it right now, and how that's changing the internet infrastructure.
Yeah, I agree with everything Bob said. There's two things that I hope that it really can help do for us. One is help our internal payment system being able to create trust in that system, because that is a bigger clusterfuck that most people give it credit for. It's the first F-bomb.
Yes, New York.
Thanks for
Thanks
for leading the way.
There we go. All right, getting it started. And the second thing is being able to allow clients to understand where their dollars are going. And I'm not referring to fraud necessarily. I'm not referring to bot traffic and this complicated programmatic ecosystem and everything. You know, where did we actually put their dollars, and being able to make it turnkey for them to just say, where did you put my money to begin with? What was the first phase of where you put my money? Because believe it or not, that's actually kind of an issue for us. If we can simply solve that, that's a great starting point for us, and I think blockchain's a great starting point.
So is it fair to say that within the MadTech world, blockchain is not fundamentally solving, it's not solving a new problem. It's a tool to solve existing, in some cases, very big problems that already exist.
Yeah, it's a new tool for solving existing problems in transparency.
Yeah, I hope new tools don't bring up new problems first before they start solving things.
So if it's primarily a transparency tool and it's primarily solving existing problems, there's a lot of companies trying to solve those problems today. They have a lot invested in this, and they're not going to go away quietly into the night. The companies that have traditionally done the best in the marketplace from a tech perspective are ones that either own a customer base, right, the ad networks, or it's the companies that really have convinced the world that their black box is better than the next person's. Is this a threat to the existing ecosystem?
Yeah, it is. Definitely. I mean, if you look at some of the large brands out there today, for every conference that we've been at this year, they've all talked about transparency, fraud, where their dollars are going. If your platform, your exchange isn't transparent, open, has some type of immutable core ledger that can record every single transaction without it being chained and make it available to everybody, you're not going to last in this ecosystem for much longer.
Well, I mean, so Zynga is a great example, right? So we built a company on top of a closed ecosystem, which was fantastic. And, you know, we did an IPO for 10 billion, and then that ecosystem decided to turn it off. And what happened? Like, you know, billions of dollars of value disappeared overnight. The interesting thing with this, with the blockchain ecosystem, it can't be turned off. So that's why it's so interesting to build something on it, especially that, you know, this is the next internet. You know, this is the next iterative face of the internet. You know, TCP/IP was the first one, World Wide Web, which is what almost every company here runs on now. This is the next one. This is, you know, true cloud computing.
I would, so I firmly agree with what you said. I mean, I think the one thing I would say though is that, you know, the companies at this table represent a bunch of startups that are, you know, that have got investment, that are building their businesses and applying their strategies towards blockchain, right? I don't think those companies that are already existing, that are those large, you know, players right now, are going away. These become acquisition opportunities for them to augment their business. You know, and that's obviously one play and one opportunity. I also would say that what you're saying is the decentralized model is also that application towards transparency, which is, you know, knowing your counterparty. That's the one thing that lacks. Even in a fully transparent model, you still don't know your most companies in this space don't know their counterparties. Like, they spend with you know, the buyer spends on a DSP, which spends with an SSP, which then spends with a publisher. And most of the time the buyer doesn't actually know who they're spending with at that publisher. That's the ads.txt is starting to resolve that, right? So, you know, I think there's this peer-to-peer nature, that's the shift. But you know, companies obviously all have to evolve, and I agree this is the new internet, but how do you make that shift? Is it the acquisition? Are you gonna go in by acquisition and let the market validate through these startups, or are you gonna build it out yourself? I think that's the bigger question with these major players today is, are they gonna build or buy?
Questions from the audience? Do people understand? Sorry.
I just want to add something. So this concept of the new internet has come up a lot. I think Andreessen was the first one who cornered that a few years ago. And I think it's cool, sounds cool. And I think it potentially is right. However, I think that, to your point earlier when you just started, blockchain is a tool. And it's a tool that can make a lot of existing processes much more efficient. and I think it can augment the internet as we know it. I don't think it's going to replace the internet. I think it's going to be, and I don't know if it's the new internet, because I don't think it has the same ease of use and capabilities to just have the normal user interacting with it, and that's to be developed. But I think it can make that usability, trust much more mainstream, and bring it more to the home, bring it more to the user that's not sophisticated. So it's a little bit of a different view on the new internet versus a new tool that will make the internet much more mainstream and much more powerful for everybody, ad tech, commercial, e-commerce, governments, employers, everybody involved.
I'd like to answer.
I'm just curious what you all think it would take for blockchain to be available for a programmatic auction. I mean, technically, it doesn't seem to be possible today. Is it just technical challenges? Is it ecosystem issues?
I mean, we're kind of attacking that right now, and I mean, we're an ad server on the ad chain, so it's this decisioning. Yeah, there's a lot of weaknesses in speed, but you know, when you're first on the internet, it was a 2600 baud modem, so I mean, it got figured out. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the works that's going to get that figured out. Like, I think in the next 6 months, you're going to see something that's like probably a magnitude or greater faster than what it is today. And then a year, then it probably would enter that space solidly.
So what
Yeah,
the timing is on it? I'm sorry. So 3 million QPS today for programmatic.
Right.
Right? Queries per second, 3 million is, you know, Zax is built up to that infrastructure as an example. What do you think it takes to get
To
blockchain
do
to
that, to do the full boat, like probably a couple of years.
And there are probably 2-3 dozen projects around the world of creating new blockchains. And there's a big project in Australia of actually creating something that's, I think, 100-fold faster than Ethereum. And so I think that, to your point, within a certain time period, once these things start becoming more commercially viable, the implementation will take place. And because of the efficiencies that come within that, it will be just plugged in and start.
And that's why we're frankly starting with OTT, because it's like all of OTT is very small.
Well, just for the audience, so they understand, blockchain, as it's being used for Bitcoin, is running into a serious speed problem. And there's a lot of efforts from different groups, some within Bitcoin and some outside, trying to use the same underlying philosophy and theories, but potentially slightly different technology to solve the speed issue. And so when we talk about the number of transactions that occur in the programmatic world, it dwarfs really any other marketplace, and so speed becomes a big issue. So I'm sorry.
I'd like to address that, because there's a lot of confusion in this space, and I think we're just propagating the confusion. Today, I can tell you, I am one of the few companies that have real customers using blockchain technology. The technology itself represents maybe 2 to 5% of the whole stack. It is a control and transparency layer. That's what it is. Let's break it down. It's dumb. It can only do writes and reads. Nothing wrong with that. But to say that a blockchain, or we should really be implementing blockchain technology to be a hyper processing layer, is to not understand the technology's fundamental use. So if you look at a company like mine, I'll turn to you and I'll say, yeah, I can do 1 million transactions a second. Would you like to see? Come to my office on 46th and 3rd. And I only use the Bitcoin blockchain. So how's that possible? How's it possible that I can make such a bold statement when we hear across the table that we need new blockchains to process high volume? And the answer is simple. We do it on a layer above the blockchain. And that's where the technology should go. To say that we're going to
But that's
create
re-centralizing.
distributed-
That's the opposite of blockchain.
That's what I was going to say.
No, it
That's
isn't.
using
No, it
the same-
isn't.
well,
Nothing about my product is centralized.
Okay, but
Nothing. It's the Lightning Network, but it's a closed source product, like a Lightning Network.
It's by definition centralized.
It's a layer. It's a layer
Decentralized
above. It's a decentralized layer. That decentralized layer,
Outside the blockchain.
Yeah.
It sits outside the blockchain. It's-
Anything outside the
point is the
blockchain.
blockchain itself can't do the transactions.
Blockchain has to be an immutable core ledger that everyone can see into that can't be changed.
Exactly.
But you're laying it outside the blockchain.
That's not true, sir. What the blockchain is used for is for control and transparency.
Exactly.
That control and transparency
recording,
gets done.
and recording.
Right.
So I'm
Gets done.
step, excuse me, I'm
From
gonna step
above
into this,
the
because
layer.
this is an active conversation, not just here, but across people that are interested in blockchain about this idea of centralized nodes, decentralized nodes, distribution patterns, and all those other things. And it has huge implications. And just a very quick example, so people in the room, you could imagine a transaction in which it's between an agency and a publisher, and they have their own blockchain and only they can see it, because they don't want to let third parties see what audience they bought, how much they paid for an impression, and a lot of information that they view as proprietary. The problem with that is one of the values of blockchain is that it's transparent to everybody, and so you know what actually happened and it's verifiable. So if you have only these two, what they call nodes, you can't solve that problem. But I don't want to.
That's not entirely true.
Okay.
I mean, one of the big things we work on too is interoperating between, there's three sets of chains, right? You got public, you got consortium chains, and you got private chains. You do have the ability to kind of move data back and forth between the two. Like, I can take all the hashes for the last 10 minutes of a private chain and write that hash to a public blockchain. That private blockchain is immutable now, right? So even though I can't see it, I can know for a fact that if I have to audit that, I can.
Blockchain is not immutable, the data is immutable, because you can turn it off if it's private.
Right, but the data is still immutable.
But not the blockchain itself.
But by definition, that is a blockchain.
So how's that different from a second layer on top of the blockchain? That's exactly how the blockchain works with
It's
second
talking
layer.
about transactions, right? So you're saying you're gonna do the verification post-transaction. The transaction's not happening through a blockchain piece of technology. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Is that you're talking about transactions between two parties happening, millions of them in 1 second. I don't, that's
So
not
the
happening
Lightning
in the blockchain.
Lightning network on the Bitcoin blockchain today isn't decentralized and it isn't verifiable. Yet it's starting to be used to the tunes of millions of dollars of transactions every day. That isn't a
The
correct
Lightning
statement.
No,
Yes.
it's not.
Millions of dollars, that's not the number of
So,
transactions.
No.
I think we could probably do this all day, but
Yeah.
let me ask.
Agreed, man.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a different thing. So, did we, I know this is gonna sound silly, but how many of you are most of you in advertising? Yeah, okay. Do you know why there's a transparency problem? Do you understand that piece? Why it exists? Yeah? But like, at the lowest level, the reason why it exists is because there's this, you heard of HTTP, obviously. Advertising is stuffed inside of an HTTP protocol that does not have accounting. So there's a lot of different nodes, like he was talking about, SSPs talk to SSPs, and SSPs are connected to DSPs, and there's like this massive ecosystem of a lot of redirects with HTTP. And the reason why the transparency problem exists is because there's no accounting in all of those transactions. So, like, I would really love to help everyone understand why we're even sitting in this room and why blockchain is pertinent to that problem, right? Because I think we could talk about technology, and we could say that, private chains and public chains, but who cares if you don't know what it does for your business, right?
I have a couple of questions
So
from
it's
the
like-
audience.
The conversation about today is fascinating, and that's part of why I came. And I never ask people, where do you think we'll be in 5 years?
It's coming.
That's the thing.
That'll be coming a little later.
Oh, okay. Well, my question is, where do you think we'll be in 1 year? In other words, what will I see as a businessman in 1 year that will affect my business?
Let's just put a pin in that for 1 second and then see what.
So everybody's talking about transparency, so my question is, obviously, companies need to keep, for advertising to work and for companies to get the benefit of it, you need to know where your money's being spent, right, and where that's going. But companies also need to keep information private, right? They don't want people to know how much they spend. So how do you, deal with those issues of some private information you don't want to get out, but other information you want out there to help manage the marketplace so that there's free competition and people are actually getting information about what they need to be doing.
So kind of putting both of those questions together, as we look forward, one of the challenges for blockchain technology within the industry is to agree upon an approach. Right? If everyone is doing their own approach, then it's a series of blockchain black boxes as opposed to optimization black boxes. Do you think that that's feasible? Right? If we're going to address transparency, it has to be addressed, even if you just talk about publisher spoofing, very simple. It needs to be addressed across all publishers and across all agencies and brands in order for that problem to really, if not 100% go away, to go away enough.
So, what's your name?
Joel.
Joel. Thanks, Joel. One of the things that you said was that it needs to be addressed by everybody for all things, all brands, all agencies, all whatever. This problem is a function where the lowest performer is considered to be the norm, and that's a major problem. Fraud, spoofing, etc. Is a problem, but for the big 5 agencies, it's not nearly the problem that everybody makes it out to be in the industry. Flat out. It's 3%. That's really bad. And we will always strive for it to be 0%. But so many of the smaller agencies have so much difficulty with this problem that it ends up being 20%. Well, we're brought down by their standards. So if you look at the average across all marketing, yeah, it's a really bad problem. But do I need to solve it because theirs is like a million times worse than mine? Yeah, I'm trying to solve it. And yes, that information becomes ubiquitous because I'm using companies like Moat and third parties who then solve the problem for me and then disseminate that technology everywhere else. So I'm actually bringing up the worst performers every single day with every piece of data that I supply with Moat with and those other companies with. Do I understand my supply chain? With a lot of diligence, and it's very hard to do, but I have 200,000 people at WPP. I have people and bodies that I can throw against this problem. And we have a very good sense of where our dollars are going. It's not nearly the problem it is for us, as it is for people like my parents, who are both entrepreneurs and both spend with Google AdSense. And my mother still calls me saying, hey, what do I do with this? And I try to get off the phone as quickly as possible. And they don't really know where their ads are going, granted. So I don't know that it's a problem that everybody needs to solve as badly as everybody else and that type of thing.
Well, it's also about bringing people to the table like we did with Ad Ledger. Like we have over 100 members of Ad Ledger now that's trying to bring ad tech and blockchain together and discussing, what's a POC that would be useful to everyone in this room.
But you're also talking about, where is that blockchain going, right? And what information is part of the blockchain? It's not everything, obviously. It has to be some things. So the industry has to kind of get together and decide what is going to be on that blockchain and where is that blockchain?
Well, that's when you start talking about the different blockchains, right? There's going to be private, there's going to be consortium, and there's going to be public. And like your private data will probably be in the private system.
Haven't we seen this before? I think we've seen this before. I remember a time where intranets were all the rage. I remember a time where AOL, because it was an intranet and the banks weren't going to use the internet, fetched the largest sum ever sold in the world. We were exactly here. Everybody was talking about no one's going to use the public internet. Everyone's going to use intranets. Intranets, small intranet companies exploded all over the United States, especially because AOL fetched the largest sum in history. So I agree. Blockchain technology will grow, it will become faster, but I think there will be a lot of consolidation, and eventually any perceived problems that there are today will go away, just like it happened on the internet. What we built were SMTP layers and different layers that allowed us to use the internet more efficiently.
Well, the computers in this office aren't on the public internet. They're in a private internet that accesses the public internet. So that's an example right there.
Well, agreed,
Kyle,
agreed.
Your statement implies that basically the largest agencies in the world who have a smaller problem to solve, but even though it's 3% in round dollars, it still represents a large amount.
Yep.
So you're going to try to solve it. That if you and others like Group M kind of say this is what we're doing, the expectation then is that since you're buying from these large white label publishers, but you're also buying from some other publisher. You're going to enforce that standard on them. Is that kind of how you view it? Enforce it meaning if they want to play with you, they have to play by the rules that you're setting.
So I'm going to enforce it on the exchanges who are going to have to enforce it onto the publishers, and I think that solve will actually come from ads.text. So let's talk through the different use cases. Ads.text, I think, is going to be a major influence on spoofing URLs. Well, spoofed URLs have a much higher density of bot traffic than non-spoofed URLs. So if I solve one, I largely solve the other. The second thing that it does is just in the same way that blockchain with the public key is attempting to solve the programmatic transparency problem, is it takes away any incentivization from using bot traffic on non-spoofed URLs. So that's great. If I solve one problem, I actually solve both problems.
Sorry to interrupt you, but do you understand that nor blockchain nor STXT, they don't solve the problem? And that's the very big threat to the industry that I'm trying to communicate to people. STXT is a threat by itself because people think and they believe it will help them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Even now, STXT is there are different types of fraud, I don't want to go technically deep in that already spoof STXT itself,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that you as an agency would probably trust someone, as Moji mentioned them, who will solve it to you. Still having
So
this problem.
that's why the beginning of my statement, and I know it was a nuance that I probably brushed over very quickly, that's why I hold my exchanges accountable for that. If they're allowing the spoofing of the publisher ID, I'm considering my exchange to be fraudulent.
Okay.
If Rubicon is doing that, if AdX is doing that, if OpenX is doing that, I'm considering them to be fraudulent exchange, and I will shut them off.
So I think,
Bob's
I think the
probably been
problem,
through some of those conversations with the exchange.
I think the ad ledger concept and other consortium-wide concepts are the ones that are going to bring this together. If people like Group M, WPP and others are coming together, understanding that there is a problem, it's not only them exerting their own resources, and it's not only smaller companies trying to play in this game, but if everybody comes together and says, like you mentioned, a POC that actually can resolve a lot of these issues, I think everybody benefits. And if everybody looks in their own ecosystem and says, I can solve it within my own ecosystem, even though your ecosystem is bigger than some countries, it still allows for solving this on a global scale. And I think that's the way to go at it.
Well, so just to add to something, Kyle said, it's not Zaxxas or Group M's problem. Well, when the ANA report came out on transparency, it was very much their problem. Like Zaxxas is getting its ass handed to it because it's a non-transparent model. It's a non-disclosed model. And it got impacted by all the other bad actors in the industry. Well, they weren't doing anything wrong or incorrectly. It's the rest of the ecosystem, so it has to be a rising tide model. And to your point, it sucks that, a good model can get pulled down by, bad actors. But I mean, there's also no way right now for Zaxxas to go transparent without killing its business strategy or business itself. And that's the one thing that I've had the biggest problem with advertising in general is that in the agency environment, the brands expect to know exactly where their dollar goes all the way to the publisher. And in reality, like when you buy a bottle of water, or, can of soda or whatever product you want at a store, you really don't know what their margin is. You don't go to like Nike and be like, how much margin do you make on my shoes? Like advertising the only space they want to know to the dollar, like I went, all the way down there. Even the brands that Group M represents they don't disclose their margin to the world on their products. So, I think that there's two sides of this where, where you find value, like, that level of transparency is what's important to you,
So I'm going to start going to Foot Locker and negotiating for my sneakers.
So I think, some of the things that we consider fraud aren't actually bad actors. They're actually operational problems. They're actually operational fat fingers. Like some of the people that receive wrong domains is because, could you imagine that you're trafficking thousands and thousands of ad tags and you're trying to align them to the right demand? You can actually mess that up.
And you give that responsibility towards
Yeah,
a 3-year-old.
it's human error, right? And we talk about fraud, and we talk about, and there's also a percentage that's human error. So, and let's talk about ads TXT for just a little bit.
Let's do it, man. I've been waiting for this.
Take him down.
So, no, I'm not, I mean,
He's practicing in the mirror this morning.
I respect it, and I think it's a great push for a start in the industry. But the problem is that it still has manual intervention by humans. And when you have humans involved, they're going to create problems, right? And so what I look at from a blockchain technology, so back in the day I was a part of the the RTB revolution, right? Where RTB came out, there was no open RTB protocol. We were going back and forth with AdMeld and trying to figure out all this stuff, right? And it took a long time for us to really actually get that normalized. You got the IAB involved, and then all of a sudden, there was a standard around open RTB, and everybody, now it's overused, right? Like the protocol now server to server, and like everybody connects with this protocol because it makes it easy. Well, what that did was brought a lot of, now you have just a lot of platforms out there that talk to each other, and you're trying to align and all the mechanics of how media gets traded. Well, ads.txt is solving the problem by the nature of cutting out a lot of players. And what happens there is that's great, and it will help. But the reality is that what you're doing is you're taking good people with you. You're taking bad people and you're taking good people with you, and you're closing the environment. And I think it's good because the industry needs something right now because we're hurting for some technology or something to be in place. But we really have to strive for an open market, and we really have to strive to really take programmatic and use and facilitate media trading without human intervention. And you want to be able to media trade with security. And so when I look at blockchain to me takes out the human intervention, meaning I'm not worried that I misspelled the domain inside of ads.txt. I'm not worried that I put an 8 instead of a 9 inside of ads.txt. I'm not worried about versioning. I'm not worried about somebody misaligning the ID that's already part of an ID that's already in an ad tag.
Yeah, I love how the big answers are
Right?
flat files.
Yeah, right. I'm not. But
What could go wrong?
I'm not bashing it either. I'm not bashing it either, right? Because I think the industry needs to start somewhere. It's just not. But it's just not. Like companies like ourselves, and regardless of the size, we have to bring technologies in place that are going to bring efficiency and transparency without human intervention. And that is the promise of blockchain, right? So
More robots.
yeah, I mean, it's the promise of blockchain, and I think that it really will solve a problem for us. Now, somebody asked, well, is it going to do it this year, or is it going to do it next year, or is it going to do it in 2021? Well, I hope so, because in 2021, hopefully digital has 50% of spend, right? Which is only 129 billion is predicted to be in 2021. Right? But think about this, like, we haven't even started to really bring on all the devices that exist today inside of advertising. Like, you still have, refrigerators that are going to be coming online. You have, I think I was walking through New York and there was a sign that had advertising. I think somebody, I can't remember his name, but anyway, everything will be online and connected. And if we are going to really solve a real problem in advertising with transparency and being able to transact with payments and have a good payment structure, you're not going to do it with the protocols that exist today in advertising, period. It just won't work. And so we have to be pushing this technology forward. So I think in a year, we'll be a lot smarter. We'll start to put in the foundations and work with these wonderful companies with all this money. I just want 1%.
Yeah, me too.
Right? Is that right? Well, why don't we just take it? So anyway,
I'll talk to
and
our
we can get
CFO.
rid of all this blockchain stuff. No. So anyway, it's something that we really need to push. And in a year, I think that we will have the starting foundation of giving people their public and private key. Right? Let's start there. Let's just give them a public and private key so that they can be identified on the internet, and we can start encrypting transactions and start to, baby steps. right? But anyway, I'm speaking my piece here, but I really think that blockchain is going to revolutionize and change the way that we trade media today, period. And if it's not today, it's gonna be tomorrow, and if you're not ready for it, you're gonna be hurting.
So what are the big barriers to that? So assuming we all agree, and certainly people sitting around this table do, that this is gonna fundamentally transform the way media is traded, what are the big barriers to making that happen?
Adoption and collaboration. We as a group have to work together.
Yeah.
If we don't work together, if you look at the statistics, and I was reading it this morning, is that a lot of the brands are pushing back on the digital spend. They're not spending as much. A lot of the CPGs, which makes up a huge amount of the spend every year on digital. If we don't collaborate as a group, and we don't work together as a group, our industry is going to go down. It's going to go down hard because fraud will take over, black boxes will take over. We need transparency, we need collaboration, and we need adoption. And we need that done because Mark Pritchard's of the world, and a lot other large CMOs, and Coca-Cola, AT&T, all these places, they're fed up.
You know, and efficiency.
And efficiency.
Yeah,
Right.
so I think the whole process of blockchain, and I'll just take it to that side of it, has a big potential way to assist with this. The whole private public key is a huge issue. Most people don't understand what it means. Most people know or heard the horror stories of someone losing their private key with 8,000 bitcoins in it, and they can't find it. I think until that's solved in a way that my mom can use it, it's going to be hard to put this in a full implementation process. And I think the problem with the Jamie Dimons of the world is also going to be a barrier to entry and a barrier to implementation, because those people that have a very strong voice, even though it's a little bit of a different industry, people listen to them, even though sometimes that conversation or even those statements are very specific to either their specific area of focus, but they're looked at as a broad overall statement to the immaturity and inability of this industry to actually perform.
They're also the largest buyer of Bitcoin, so just,
right, which,
yeah, despite what he says. Yeah, what?
The largest buyer by far.
I mean, you have to remember, is like the first website your mom probably couldn't use either, right? So there is a UI problem to blockchain today. Like, yeah,
UI, UX,
it's going to
yes.
get fixed.
Yes.
Speed's going to get fixed. Like, you know, we do have what we call in the game industry a poker room problem. You know, I walk into an empty poker room, I walk out, you walk in, you walk out. I mean, that happens a lot of times. You just gotta, I mean, just like we did with poker rooms, you just gotta figure it out. You know, I mean, at Mad Hive, we just partnered with someone who's like the third largest buyer of OTT, right? So now we're dragging them into blockchain and they're happy for it. So, you know,
And
you
I
just
agree.
got to get a few players that'll start, and then the ball just starts rolling.
I agree, and I think that the private public key is a huge issue. I think that by itself, just because it's so technical in nature today, and just because people are talking about cold storage versus warm storage, and if that's resolved, meaning there's a reliable way to electronically transact private keys and public keys in a way that's seamless and UI friendly, UX friendly, that'll take this whole thing to a higher level of implementation. And we are partnered with a bunch of people that are working with us to create that as well, but there are other initiatives in that area, and I think that'll be a big part of moving this thing forward.
So when I go to get a public and private key, the problem is, so I'm going to get super pragmatic. I don't know what I do with that yet. So we need to first of all figure
Give it to
out
me.
what the purpose is.
Give me the public, give me the
I'll take good
private.
care of it.
So going back to one of the earlier questions that we went around the table on, it was, what are your problems? Transparency is a problem that I believe, subjectively, granted many, ads.tax is going to have a major impact on. If I get 50% better, I'm pretty damn happy with 1.5%. Is it great? Am I going to keep striving to get better? Of course. Are we going to figure that out? I'm very optimistic, but I'm sometimes blindly optimistic, granted. So going to the problems that I do have. One, I don't know where my third-party data is actually coming from. I don't know who's actually modeling it. When it originates, when that cookie gets created, I don't know if some, fresh out of college kid is taking a pool of cookies, modeling it, and then doing something else with it, and then hands it off to somebody else who models it, and then eventually it makes it into my systems on my line items, and I end up buying against it, and it says in market auto.
but I have no clue what that segment is actually comprised of. That's a major problem I actually have. If you look at Omnicom, Megan Pagliuca is violently against third-party data sources because of that. The third-party data ecosystem could really use a boost, and I think that's a wonderful place for the blockchain community to start focusing on. I don't necessarily agree with the transparency issue for blockchain. Regarding buying on futures block trading, your company scares the hell out of me.
Why is that, Kyle?
So we were talking earlier also about what fundamental shifts that could bring in this blockchain community. Your company, I think, is the only company that can have something that I can explain to TV people as a tectonic shift in how we actually purchase media because of its ability to actually create a secondary futures market, speculation market even. That scares me. So those are 3 different use cases that are really interesting.
Because you could be going up against banks.
Yeah, exactly. That's
who create a derivative of, you know,
yeah.
boxes.
Martin Sorrell might love that.
Yeah.
Jamie Dimon.
Jamie Dimon might love that. So those are 3 very pragmatic use cases I think that are interesting. But I don't know what to do with these public and private keys yet, except for hand them over to Tom.
Of course.
But those I think are very clear use cases because and payment mechanisms too, so that my clients can audit me with a snap of the finger. I hand them the ledger and they say, I know exactly where every dollar that you spent went to. That's powerful to
So
me.
that's,
Also internal payment mechanisms.
that right there is what's going to change the industry.
I agree.
That
Yeah.
And that's
exact
the-
use case. All the other use cases are awesome,
And
but
that's the exchange of private
Then we
payment.
need, is anybody here from Mediation?
You work out of the office, so.
Yeah, I do.
I'd love for them to be a bigger part of the conversation because if I'm gonna be tracking that, then they have to be a part of it. They're too integrated and I can't get rid of them. I don't wanna get rid of them. They're a great partner.
yeah, I mean,
We need them as
that
a
use
participant.
case is a really good use case because, I mean, one of the other biggest problems in the industry is just all the discrepancy and reporting and everything
Mhm.
and all, and payment
Exactly.
mechanism, right? It's in make goods and everything else. So when everybody is actually connected and you actually use this technology, then everybody's gonna know that margin cut,
Mhm.
right? And that's something yet to be determined as, you know, what do we really want to happen
So we
here,
have 2
right?
questions from the audience, one in the back there. Yep.
That's only gonna happen.
Blockchain still seems a little elusive, and to your use case, I was wondering if someone in the panel could actually explain how blockchain will solve that use case, the third-party data use case, and also like to add to that use case, a lot of the publisher's data is being used, like the URLs are being used to create audience profiles by the buy side, and none of that gets compensated back to the publisher. So for Zillow, you're using Zillow's URL and users to target them elsewhere and not paying back Zillow for that because now you know where the user went on a Zillow site. So how, is that a use case blockchain can solve, and if so, how?
Yes, because you can do data provenance. So you can say this, through the blockchain, you can say this bit of data was created by Zillow at this point in time. And then anytime that gets used, you can see like the chain of where it went.
And by a smart contract, you activate the compensation backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I was telling, that's what I was saying, Kyle, is that
Yeah, I like that.
it's gonna really, really change this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I like that use case a lot.
Let me just, the other question.
So it feels like blockchain is overkill for accountability. Right? I mean, like blockchain is just a database, right? And there's no reason to have this massive distributed ledger in order to have basically accountability when you're. Blockchain is not about trust, right?
It's all about trust.
It's all about trust.
The whole thing is about trust.
No, sorry, you're right. It's not about truth. It's about trust. Not
No,
about
it is
truth,
about
right?
truth also.
Also. It's
Because
no,
it's-
because you have to trust the source of the truth, right? Blockchain is about trustless transactions being written to a blockchain which is auditable. So
Correct.
why is that necessary for some sort of accountability? Why can't we just have? Why isn't there just a database where you trust the people who are putting
Who controls the
information-
database?
Who controls the information that's being put on?
So-
But
who
that's
controls the chain?
But isn't that
Yeah,
what
who
the
controls
world-
the
That's what the
database?
world
Like
is
this.
today. Yeah,
Let me-
but
let me-
what-
let me
what's-
try to-
today? What's about, like,
But today, wait,
who are we
today.
who are we trusting that a transaction happens? Who are we trusting to write to the blockchain?
Well, peer-to-peer, right? So, I mean,
He's touching on something that is extremely critical. Just because you have a blockchain doesn't mean that you've put data there that's truthful. Any con artist can put data on a blockchain.
Yeah, but you can
also,
see who they are.
right?
You can always track down who they
You
are.
could see,
verify
you could ask them to prove who they are
Right.
by
You could
signing a
define it,
transaction.
yes.
You can't see who they are. You can ask them to sign a transaction with their private key to prove that they were the one who put the data within the blockchain itself. So yes, what you bring up is extremely relevant.
Sorry, so I'm an advisor to NIAX and an advisor to another company called Kachava that's just launched Exchange. So Kachava is the largest verification company for mobile right now, right? So if you think about it, Lou's company, NIAX, is doing the actual transaction. There's another company doing the verification of that transaction. So I think that part of this is building out that ecosystem of who are going to be the verifiers, who are the peer-to-peer transactions happening between two trusted counterparties, and that to me is what's not built out in this ecosystem right now. And there's not market leaders or anything, or there's not enough scale to really say who's what's going to work yet. But it's the having the transaction between two counterparties that are trusted, and then a verification system to be able to back that up. And it's because it's all in a public ledger, anyone else can go get multiple verifiers, right? So if there's one verifier that's routinely wrong, they get kicked out. Like.
Advertisers are gonna put all their transactions.
No, they won't. They won't.
You don't know that. You can't. No one can say that.
Well, they might put the hashes. They might put the hash of the
Right,
transaction, but not the
why
data
don't
itself.
these three parties just have a shared database? Like,
Okay.
why do you need a blockchain?
So are we regulated as an industry?
No. But why do you need a blockchain to have accountability between?
So I think this is a very valid question, and I think it goes to the difference between a private and a public blockchain. I think what's going to happen is consortiums like digital advertising, like other industry, educations, governments will have their own private blockchains, and the authentication of transactions that are going to happen there are going to happen with an internal miners, if you will, whereas the actual transaction records can happen with the public blockchain. So you have the ability to control and show only to the audience that you want to show what you want to show, because WPP is not going to be showing all the information on the public blockchain just because it's a public blockchain, it's unavailable, but the ability to share with the people that they want to share with information that's relevant for specific transactions or growth of business will happen privately in most scenarios. And again, I'm not saying that I'm a futurist, but in most scenarios, because there's value to the data itself to be held by the consortium itself. The ability to do it on the public blockchain where miners can benefit from it and actually say that that transaction is verified and they're kicked out if they're not doing it on a constant basis can be just an added layer of security and transparency to everybody involved from the outside.
Yeah,
Let me ask you.